Have you ever sat in a quiet room, maybe early in the morning or just before bed, and felt that the silence wasn't peaceful, but heavy? Like something was missing, even though everything looks the same. The furniture's still there. The photos are still smiling back from the walls. But the feeling is different now. That stillness doesn't calm you. It stings a little. If you've ever felt that way, please know this: you're not alone. So many people feel this shift as they grow older. When the busyness of raising kids, building a career, and tending to daily life slows down, or even stops, we're left with space. Sometimes too much space. And in that space, loneliness can creep in. But here's something most people won't tell you. Loneliness in old age isn't just about being physically alone. It's about feeling unseen, unneeded, forgotten. It's that ache of realizing the world you helped build has moved on, and somehow you didn't get the memo. Maybe your children live far away. Maybe you've lost the partner who used to fill the room with conversation. Maybe friends have drifted or passed or are struggling in their own silence. And maybe no one has said it out loud before, but I will. That hurts. And it's okay to admit that. You see, we live in a world that doesn't prepare us for this part of life. We spend our youth learning how to grow up, build a life, find love, raise families, but no one really teaches us how to keep going when the phone stops ringing as often, or when invitations dry up, or when people stop needing you the way they used to. That's why today, I want to have a real conversation with you. Not the kind that pats you on the back and says, just stay positive. No, this is a conversation about how to really face that loneliness and how to rise above it. Because you deserve more than to just cope with life. You deserve to feel alive again. Let's begin with something many people don't realize: the silence you're feeling. It can become your friend. I know that probably sounds strange. Right now, silence might feel like the enemy. It reminds you that no one's calling, that the house feels too big, that dinner is just you and the television again. But let me gently offer another way to see it. What if that silence isn't trying to hurt you, but trying to teach you? When you were younger, life was noisy. Remember that? The kids yelling in the next room? The dog barking? The job always pulling you in another direction? So many things demanded your time that you barely had a second to hear your own thoughts. And now? You finally have that time. You finally have the stillness. And yes, it's scary, because in that silence, there's nothing left to distract you from you. That inner voice, the one that might whisper things like, I don't matter anymore, or no one needs me. It gets louder in the quiet. But here's the thing. Underneath that voice, if you're brave enough to listen past the sadness, is someone who's still here. Someone who's lived, who's loved, who's lost, who's learned. And that person still has so much to give, not just to others, but to themselves. So the first step is this: don't run from the silence. Sit with it. Write in a notebook. Reflect. Remember who you are. Not who you used to be when the house was full, but who you are now, strong, seasoned, and still evolving. That quiet time can become the most profound conversation you've ever had with yourself. Now, once you've made a little peace with that silence, not perfect peace, just a beginning, the next thing is something a little more active. You need to take responsibility for something. Anything. I'll explain why. In the earlier chapters of life, responsibility is just a given. You've got kids to feed, bills to pay, a partner to care for, groceries to get, work to do. Even when it's exhausting, it gives your life shape. It says, you matter, because someone's counting on you. But in older age, that responsibility often fades. People stop asking you for help. No one needs you to fix the sink, drive them to practice, or show up to work at 8 a.m. And on the surface, that sounds like freedom. But the truth is, it can feel like you're slowly disappearing. So what do? You make your own responsibility. Even if it's small. Maybe you start a garden and commit to tending it each day. Maybe you walk around the block and pick up litter. Maybe, and this one's powerful, you find someone who's lonelier than you and call them every Tuesday morning. Not because you're bored, but because it matters. Because you matter. Responsibility is like oxygen for the soul. It gives purpose to your days. It tells you, I'm still needed. I still have something to offer. And you do. You've got wisdom that can't be Googled. You've got strength that was forged in decades of experience. You've survived heartbreak, change, illness, disappointment, and you're still here. That makes you valuable, far more than you probably give yourself credit for. You see, loneliness doesn't always mean no one's around. Sometimes it just means you've forgotten that your existence still has meaning. And taking responsibility, even for just one tiny thing, can reignite that spark. It gives you a reason to get out of bed, to brush your hair, to lift your chin. Not for show, not for someone else, but because it's a way of saying, I still count. And you do. So deeply. Now, before we go any further, I want you to pause for a moment and just breathe. In and out. Slowly. Let whatever emotions are rising come. Maybe they're tears. Maybe it's just a long-held sigh you didn't realize you needed to release. Let them come. Because everything you're feeling is valid. And everything you've felt before, all the loss, the quiet days, the holidays that didn't go how you hoped, it all brought you here. And you're still standing. Not many people talk about this stage of life as an adventure. But that's what it can be. A quieter one, yes, but no less meaningful. And so, if you're sitting there wondering if this is it, if the best days are behind you, and all that's left is to slowly fade, I want to tell you from my heart, that's not true. This part of your life holds a depth the earlier years couldn't. You have more perspective now, more clarity, more grit. And with just a little courage, you can use those gifts to transform the loneliness into something sacred. You don't have to move mountains. You just have to take one small step. Talk to yourself kindly. Get up and water the plants. Write a letter. Smile at a neighbor. Reach out to someone you miss. Cook your favorite meal, even if it's just for you. You're worth the effort. You're worth the care. And you're definitely not alone in this. Let's keep going. You see, the silence and the sense of disconnection we talked about earlier, they're real, and they can feel overwhelming. But there's something else that often settles in alongside loneliness, and it's something we don't always like to admit. It's the feeling of being forgotten. Forgotten by the world, by family, maybe even by life itself. And the truth is, sometimes you might feel like you're the only one who remembers who you used to be. That version of yourself, who laughed more, who danced at weddings, who had 100 things to do and not enough hours in the day. But here's something I want to gently remind you of. Just because fewer people are watching now, doesn't mean your life has lost its value. You're still here. You're still becoming. And there is still beauty in becoming. There's another important step in moving through loneliness that many people avoid because it's so difficult, but also so freeing. It's forgiveness. I know that word carries a lot of weight. It might even stir up some resistance just hearing it. Forgiveness sounds noble in theory, but in practice it can feel like you're being asked to let people off the hook. People who hurt you, neglected you, or walked away when you needed them most. But forgiveness isn't really about them. It's about you. It's about lightening the emotional load you've been carrying for far too long. Because what happens as we age is this. We begin to collect more stories. Some of them beautiful. A first kiss, the birth of a child, a shared sunset, a surprise phone call that made your day. But some of them are painful. betrayal, abandonment, harsh words, silence where there should have been support. And over time, if we're not careful, those painful stories begin to harden. They shape how we see the world, how we see others, how we see ourselves. You might find yourself bracing for disappointment even before it happens. Expecting people to forget you, hurt you, overlook you. And little by little, that mindset doesn't just protect you, it isolates you. It turns every quiet moment into a reminder of past wounds instead of a chance to start again. But when you forgive, and I mean truly forgive, something shifts. You're not saying what happened was okay. You're not pretending it didn't hurt. What you're saying is, I refuse to let this pain have the final say in my life. I'm choosing to reclaim my peace, even if the people involved never apologize, never change, never even realize what they did. You're doing it for you, because you deserve that freedom, that breath of fresh air, that exhale that says, I've carried this long enough and now I lay it down. Maybe it's your grown child who stopped calling. Maybe it's a sibling who cut ties years ago. Maybe it's a friend who slowly disappeared after your spouse passed away. Or maybe, and this is the hardest one, maybe it's yourself. Maybe you need to forgive yourself for things you did or didn't do, or simply wish you'd done differently. Let me tell you something that might be hard to believe. You are still worthy of love, even if you made mistakes. You are still capable of joy, even if you have regrets. And you are still allowed to start again, even now. Sometimes forgiveness starts with the smallest sentence. I am ready to stop hurting. You don't have to know how to do it all at once. You just have to be open to the idea that healing is possible. And here's where things begin to shift. When you've made a little peace with the silence, when you've found a responsibility to tend to, and when you begin to loosen the grip of old pain, something else starts to grow in that space. Something surprisingly beautiful. A kind of clarity. A kind of quiet strength. You realize that you are still capable of connection, but maybe not in the same ways as before. You don't need a dozen people calling every day. Sometimes all it takes is one meaningful conversation a week. One neighbor who knows your name. One person who lights up when you walk into the room. And if you don't have that right now, don't let that harden your heart. Stay open. That's the most courageous thing you can do, to stay open when life has given you reasons to close. Reach out, even when you don't feel like it. Send a message. Make the call. Join the group. Go to the library event, or the senior yoga class, or the weekly gathering at the community center. Not because you're desperate, but because you're investing in your own future. You never know who you'll meet when you show up just once more. There's an old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. That applies to friendship too, to purpose, to joy. You might think you're too late, too old, too tired, too set in your ways, but you're not. You're right on time. And every day you wake up is another chance to choose hope over resignation. The kind of loneliness that creeps in as we age doesn't always announce itself loudly. It doesn't slam doors or scream for attention. It settles in quietly, in the empty chair across the table, in the silence after the news goes off, in the empty inbox. But here's the secret. Just because it arrives quietly doesn't mean it can't be changed. You have more power than you think. To reach, to create, to rediscover. And if no one's told you this recently, let me be the one to say it. You're not a burden. You're not in the way. You're not invisible. You are still here, and the world is better with you in it. So take a breath. Look around. Maybe even step outside. The world may feel distant at times, but it's still yours to be part of. The sun still rises for you. The birds still sing. And there are still hands out there, waiting for someone brave enough to extend their own. We'll keep going from here. One of the most incredible things about growing older is that you've seen enough life to know what matters and what doesn't. You've watched seasons change, people come and go, plans unravel, and sometimes fall right back into place. And through it all, you've stayed. You've endured. That kind of resilience, that quiet endurance, is something younger generations often overlook. But it's worth more than gold. Still, when you're alone, it's easy to forget just how much wisdom you carry. That's why one of the most powerful ways to overcome loneliness is to share what you know, to give your experience a voice. Maybe you think your stories aren't interesting. Maybe you've told them before and no one seemed to listen. But I promise you this, somewhere, someone needs to hear what you've lived through. Whether it's your grandchild, your neighbor, or even a stranger in a community group, your story might be the spark that helps someone else feel seen. And in telling it, something magical happens. You feel seen too. You don't have to write a book or give a speech. Just tell one story. Share one moment from your life that meant something to you. And do it not just to relive the past, but to connect in the present. That connection, even brief, begins to mend the quiet cracks that loneliness creates. You might start by writing it down, even if it's only for yourself. Describe a time when you felt proud, a time you were afraid but kept going anyway, a time you laughed so hard your stomach hurt. Write it, then maybe read it to someone, or record it, or save it for your grandchildren. That act alone, of giving your memories form, is a way of saying, my life mattered and still does. And here's the beautiful thing. The more you give your life meaning through action, the more you begin to draw meaning toward you. You start to notice little joys again. You might find yourself humming a tune while making tea. You might say hello to someone in the grocery store instead of just walking by. You begin to rejoin the living, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs. Because you do belong. Not just in your home, not just in the memory of people who used to call, but in this world, right now. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: joy. I'm not talking about the over-the-top, bouncing off the walls kind of joy. I mean the quiet kind. The joy of sunlight on your skin, the smell of something baking, a funny memory that pops into your mind while you're brushing your teeth. You might wonder, how can I even think about joy when I'm battling this deep ache of loneliness? But here's what I've found. Joy and pain aren't opposites. They often walk hand in hand. And sometimes the smallest moments of joy are the ones that save us, the ones that give us the strength to keep going. So don't wait for big, dramatic changes to lift your loneliness. Start with tiny rituals that bring comfort. Make your coffee a little slower in the morning. Choose a mug that makes you smile. Sit outside for 5 minutes and just breathe. These might sound too simple, but don't underestimate their power. They remind you that life is still happening, and you're still invited. And let's not forget the body. Loneliness doesn't just live in the mind. It settles into your muscles, your bones, your posture. When you feel disconnected, your shoulders slump. Your steps become small. You move like someone who's trying to disappear, but you're not meant to disappear. Try this with me, just for a moment. Sit up a little taller. Stretch your arms out wide. Take a deep breath. Feel that? That's life. Still in you. Still for you. When you move your body, even just a little, you signal to your mind that you're here, that you haven't given up. Go for a gentle walk. Do a few stretches. Turn on a song you used to love and move however you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And every time you move, you're reminding yourself, I still have a say in how this story goes. Loneliness tells you to shrink. Connection, even with yourself, helps you expand again. And if you've made it this far in our conversation, I want you to know how proud I am of you. It's not easy to sit with hard truths. It's not easy to look loneliness in the eye, and decide that it doesn't get to have the last word. But you're doing it. Right now. In your own way. And that matters. The truth is, this part of your life is not just a waiting room for the end. It is a chapter, and like all good chapters, it can be rich, layered, unexpected, even beautiful. You have more pages to write, more kindness to offer, more light to share, and maybe most importantly, more love to give, not just to others, but to yourself. It's never too late to fall back in love with your own life. Even if it looks different now, even if the people you loved most are no longer at your side, you are still here. You are still enough. So lift your eyes, even if it's just to the window, even if it's cloudy today. You're part of something bigger. And this world still has room for your voice, your presence, your unique heartbeat. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you are. Let's keep walking together. Because every step you take toward yourself, every moment you choose to rise instead of retreat, you are rewriting what it means to grow older. You're proving that aging doesn't have to mean fading. It can mean refining, deepening, and becoming more fully who you were always meant to be. You may not have the same energy you did at 30, but you have something even more powerful now: perspective. The kind that sees past small annoyances. The kind that values a good conversation more than a good bargain. The kind that knows how precious a quiet afternoon can be when it's filled with meaning instead of emptiness. So give yourself permission to embrace this season, not as a slow decline, but as a wise unfolding. You don't need a packed social calendar to feel connected. You need authenticity. You need truth. And you need moments that make you feel alive again, even if they're quiet, even if they're simple. Maybe that means starting each day with a little ritual that's just yours. A cup of tea in your favorite chair, a journal entry to capture your thoughts, a prayer, a song, or a stretch that reminds you, this body, this breath, this life, they still belong to you. Maybe it means volunteering an hour a week to read to children at the library, or sharing a recipe with someone who's never cooked from scratch before, or smiling at the cashier who seems like they're having a hard day. Maybe it means being brave enough to tell someone, "I've been lonely. Could we talk sometime?" There's strength in that kind of honesty. And you might be surprised how many people feel the same, but are waiting for someone else to break the silence first. And yes, there will still be hard days. Days when the ache creeps back in. When you feel forgotten again. When the silence feels more like a wall than a window. That's okay. Don't shame yourself for that. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days showing up is the victory. Just getting dressed, taking a walk, making your bed, those are all small triumphs that say, I'm still in this. And you are. You're still in this life. Still writing your story. Still choosing to live it with grace and courage, even when no one's watching. That is beautiful. That is powerful. So what can you do right now to begin reclaiming your voice from the silence? Maybe it's as simple as leaving a comment below, sharing one thing you miss, or one thing you're grateful for today. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Maybe it's just sitting quietly, placing your hand over your heart, and whispering to yourself, I'm still here, and that matters. Because it does. You matter. You always have, and you always will. This isn't about pretending everything's okay when it's not. It's about learning to carry the loneliness with strength, to walk beside it instead of letting it drag you down. It's about remembering that even in the silence, even in the stillness, your life is still meaningful. And maybe the world doesn't tell you that often enough. Maybe you haven't heard it in a while. So let me say it now as clearly as I can. You are still needed. Your wisdom, your presence, your story, your laughter, your love, They're not done yet. Not even close. So stand a little taller. Speak a little louder. Live a little fuller. You've made it through so much already. And now, with every step forward, you have the chance to turn this chapter, the one that once felt like the end, into one of your most meaningful beginnings. Here's to the conversation still waiting to happen. The friendship still waiting to form. The joy still waiting to rise. And here's to you, for listening, for caring, for choosing life even when it gets quiet. If this message touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need it too. Leave a comment, tell your story, be part of something bigger, because even a small voice can echo powerfully when it's honest. And if you haven't yet, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. We talk about life, aging, healing, and growing. Not just surviving, but truly living at every stage. You're not finished. And you are absolutely, without a doubt, not alone. Here's to living your fullest, deepest, most meaningful life, at any age. I'll see you in the next video.